Welcome back. We got some roster moves to go over. Let's get into it. First off, Vitality. They're signing Stizzy and Eversax. I know last week I was reporting on the fact that Firstkiller might come over to Vitality. That obviously is not going through. Firstkiller had a lot of options this offseason, as he normally does. He's normally one of the, when he's on the market, normally one of the hottest prospects out there in terms of who wants to pick him up, who's he going to end up signing with kind of thing. And Vitality offered him. He chooses not to go to Europe. He also chose not to go to the Middle East with Twisted Minds. I know they have been sending out some offers as well this offseason, but Firstkiller chooses not to take either of those options and chooses to stay in North America, where he has a bit more control over the team and, doesn't have to travel across the world to play Rocket League. So it's understandable. But Stizzy and Eversax are joining. Stizzy obviously had a relatively successful year on Dignitas, definitely a breakout year for him. And then Eversax is coming over. He coached Gentlemates last year, a two-time major champion coach. But it makes sense considering the Gentlemates squad is completely changing. And speaking of the Gentlemates, let's just get into that as well. Last week I reported on the fact that Nass and Oski were going to be the duo, and now they've got their third and their coach. So earlier in the week we had it announced that Snaski was going to end up coaching the duo, and then that third spot was really up in the air for a bit, and they end up landing on Archie. So this makes Europe's situation a little bit more interesting because originally Geekay Esports was going to continue with Joyo and Archie, and then Oli was on the outs. Archie, obviously, if he's going to Gentlemates, is not continuing with Geekay. So he ends up joining Nass and Oski over on the Gentlemates. I think this is a really, really good team, and probably one of the teams with the best momentum and best improvement. I know there was some struggles with Ninjas in Pajamas last year with that Nass, Oski, and Snaski trio. I know that's not technically a trio because Snaski's the coach, but between those three, it was like a little bit iffy during the regular season. They couldn't win a best of 7, at least against many important teams. Failed to make both majors, but then obviously made the run at Worlds with a lot of momentum, and now they've replaced Radosin with Archie. So this is a squad with a positive momentum and a positive upgrade for them. I'd say Vitality is probably a positive upgrade too, considering something had to change as well. But in comparison to the rest of Europe, Carmine Corps loses Drawley, and due respect to Juicy, but that's still a tough spot to be in. And so they've definitely, I don't want to say they've won the offseason, but they're doing a great job this offseason. That is Gentlemates. Speaking of more of Gentlemates, Yujin, he is expected to team with Radosin and Mtzr. These guys are going to be looking for an organization, but I know Yujin was originally a restricted free agent for next year. He might still be a restricted free agent. Honestly, I'm not sure, but he does still have his team lined up and is looking to play. Mtzr had a pretty disappointing second split with Team BDS. He ended up coming in. There was the Ascend duo of Nico and Juke. They had Matt in the first split, and then they get signed to BDS, coached by Extra, and Mtzr joins for Matt. They end up having a pretty bad second split, but then they almost... Actually, I don't want to say almost won the LCQ, but they were in the finals for the LCQ and upset Ninjas in Pajamas in the upper AFL portion of that. So it was a pretty solid last event out of them. But Mtzr ends up leaving that squad. We're not quite sure what's happening with the rest of that BDS squad. And I'm sure that's going to be something or a situation that develops in the next coming weeks. Because I've got a lot of Europe figured out and no word on Nico, Juke, or Coach Extra, or the BDS organization. So that's definitely a piece that's going to have to be sorted out a little bit later. Speaking of Geekay, though, I know I mentioned Archie wasn't going to be continuing with them, but Seikoo is going to be joining them. So it ends up being kind of a one-for-one trade. Is it a one-for-one trade? Because Seikoo comes over from Gentlemates, and Archie goes over to Gentlemates from Geekay. Yeah, it is a one-for-one trade, Seikoo for Archie. There was a moment it looked like the trio might be Joyo, Archie, Seikoo, but originally, that duo of Joyo, Archie, and then they bring Seikoo in, and then through the course of the week, it started to look more and more like Joyo and Seikoo were the duo, and they weren't sure if Archie was going to end up sticking. So Archie kind of becomes a domino that goes to Gentlemates, and then so Seikoo's going to be joining Joyo and Coach Eekso. I think Coach Eekso is still on the roster. And then really the big piece of news that is probably going to be decided an hour before I put this video live, because that's the way this offseason tends to be going, is that Geekay's third is currently up in the air. It could be ApparentlyJack. ApparentlyJack has the decision to make in between Geekay or Twisted Minds as it stands. And I think I don't want to say which way he's leaning because I'm not sure how public that information is. Granted, it might already be decided at this point. I might be a little bit late. It was looking like it might be decided. I drew most of this whiteboard yesterday, and so it was looking like it might be decided in between me drawing this whiteboard and me putting it live today. But we're still waiting to hear apparently Jack's decision, and once we hear that, we're gonna know a little bit more, obviously about Geekay, but definitely about Twisted Minds and the spot that they're in. Again, Twisted Minds doesn't really have a report this week, but I think they're in the background of a lot of this. So, as for the rest of EU, I'd say aside from Geekay actually locking in ApparentlyJack, I think your general top 8-ish teams in Europe are kind of locked. You've got your top 4 with Karmine Core, Vitality, Gentlemates, and Geekay, if they end up getting Jack. And then 4 other teams that we're looking at. Obviously, I mentioned Yujin, Mtzr, and Radosin earlier. But 3 others that we know. Right now, it looks like the 2 Danes, 1 Bruv roster from the LCQ, which is Acro, Tempo, and Edgeby, are expected to stick together. 2 other duos end up forming, including Joria's, Oli, and CRR, and then Atomic, Tox, and Raziers. So Joria's, Oli, CRR, I know it's a couple of off seasons in a row where Joria's and Oli have been like, oh, we should team together, and then it hasn't ended up working out. I think I wrote them down as a duo last year, and then that ended up falling through. But it looks like they've got their team for now, and they're bringing over CRR, who is Spanish, native from Europe, but has been playing in North America and South America the past 2 seasons. So he ends up going back to Europe. Meanwhile, Tox, Atomic, and Raziers all are coming back to Europe from various locations. Atomic and Tox both played in the Middle East last year. Atomic with Twisted Minds, Tox with Al-Qadsia. And then Raziers was playing for the Healthy Chiefs down in OCE, and he ends up coming back. So it's like a trio of ex-imports with that roster. But those are 8 different teams in Europe. Again, there's still some missing pieces, most notably, in my opinion, that Team BDS squad. Also the Team BSK squad of Stizzy, Mozzarella, and Pisky. Haven't heard about any of them getting any locked-in spots yet. So if we're looking at the rest of Europe and what's still to be decided, I think those are 5 players that I'm really still keeping an eye on. Potentially Alpha 54 as well. Monkey Moon's still under contract with Vitality. Just a couple options to be thinking of as we continue through this offseason and more stuff in Europe looks to be more solidified. That's all I got on Europe. We got to talk about North America because they started actually doing stuff this week. Earlier in the week, it got rumored. Now it's actually officially been announced. Shopify Rebellion, for the rebels out there, they have signed and announced Firstkiller, LJ, Kofor, and Violent Panda. So this is a squad. You've obviously got 2/3 of the Ultimates from last year, at least the 2/3 of them that were on the pitch with Firstkiller and LJ. And then you've got Kofor coming in from Spacestation Gaming. You also pick up Violent Panda as a coach. He was formerly with Dignitas, now officially signed with Shopify Rebellion. This is definitely your favorite to be the North American 2 seed and the greatest threat that NRG has on the pitch in regional competitions next year. This is a really solid squad. As for the former Shopify Rebellion players, 2-piece, Reddles, Wavy, and Memory. Memory was a coach, obviously, but they are all unrestricted free agents. I'll admit I didn't check, but JNaps also never tweets, and I don't remember seeing anything from him. I know he was an assistant coach for Shopify Rebellion last year, but I also think he might be looking for other opportunities as well. But at least these 4 have tweeted out that they are looking for, new teams, new opportunities as they head into the next season. New as of, 4 hours, 35 minutes ago? Maybe it was just 4 hours ago. GenG Mobile One Racing. They're expected to release Cheese and pick up Rise. This was kind of a bombshell because originally it was thought that this GenG roster was going to be sticking together. Obviously, you had the NA2, and then we'll get to the potentially NA3 that makes some moves. But it was looking like they were going to run it back with Justin, Cheese, and Magic Bear. But at least as of today, that is no longer happening. Cheese ends up, getting the boot. Rise ends up coming in. This is the second time that Rise has been rumored to come to North America. For those who remember the version 1 transfer fiasco of winter 2022, he didn't end up coming over to North America. This time, there's a little bit more heads up, a little bit more time to get that move solidified. Not just a 2-week transfer window. So, yeah. But looks like Rise might actually be coming to North America at this point. Cheese, on the other hand, is immediately probably the piece that I'm trying to build around if I'm a North American 5th seed trying to swing up into the top 4. Because, and let's just get right into it, Spacestation Gaming, who is probably expected to still be in that North American top 4, they are expected to sign Chronic and Diaz. So at the beginning of the offseason, Scribbles retires. As I mentioned earlier, Kofor ends up going to Shopify Rebellion. That means you've really only got Reveal still as a player on the organization of Space Station. So building around Reveal, you got Chronic, you got Diaz. Diaz obviously on Complexity last year, made the first major, didn't end up making the second major. Actually, he did, but through the 1v1, so that kind of counts. And then Chronic, who was on Ultimates all of last year as well. I've seen a lot of people talking about how, Chronic played a little bit better than LJ on Ultimates last year. I think they were pretty interchangeable, to be honest. But if the Ultimates wanted to switch something up, it ends up just, LJ goes with Firstkiller and Kofor. Chronic ends up going to Space Station with Diaz and Reveal. So, and it also looks like Coach X Perry is going to continue with the organization as well. So those are your probable top 4 teams out of North America. That being said, there are some really strong pieces out there to build a 5th seed out of North America. I like Cheese, as a player and as a snack, I guess. But I like Cheese. Wavy obviously made World Championship through LCQ, kind of revitalized what Shopify Rebellion looks like. Reddles and Two Piece obviously both made Worlds as well. Could still end up importing a player, and I'll get to who could be available for that as well. But those are your expected North American 4 seeds. But at least Cheese, and then as a coach, Sad Jr., I have no idea where he is at this point in the offseason. And so if you're trying to build a North American 5th seed, I'm looking at Cheese and Sad Jr. right off the rip and curious to see what they end up building. Hopefully they stay together, or they get together. I'm not sure. That's probably going to unfold in the coming weeks. Last thing I'll touch on the whiteboard, my wife ended up drawing this Furia logo. Shout out to her because she did a phenomenal job. And I know you guys are going to compliment her on her logo drawing and completely roast me for whatever the heck this is. My drawings I've been told my drawings look really good, but they look really good until you actually get someone who can draw in here. And so now the rest of my drawings, of course, look really bad. But Furia roster is expected to be Yan, Lost, and Swift. This was an interesting situation that developed throughout this week because the original duo was looking like it was going to be Yan and Swift. Started the offseason, looked like they were going to be trying out different players. And for about 30 minutes on Thursday or something, it was looking like it was going to be Yan, Swift, and Rise. Then this ends up not coming through, so the deal wasn't finalized. But it was a pretty solid rumor out there for a moment until it was reconfirmed 30 minutes later. Hey, this actually isn't happening. And so it ends up so that Lost sticks. That means Drafinio is on the market. And then another big change for Furia is that Bruno Visky, who was coaching Team Secret the past several years, he's expected to replace STL as a coach for Furia. So Furia obviously had a pretty disappointing end of the season. I regarded them pretty highly throughout the year, and they made obviously a semifinal in Birmingham. But at least in Raleigh, EWC, and Worlds, definitely subpar performances from what you would expect from that Furia squad. Changes had to be happening. And so it's Drafinio out, Swift in, Lost sticks around, and then Bruno in as coach. So I think this really revitalizes the team. I think you put all the best pieces in Brazil together again, and I'm curious to see what they end up doing. But that is your whiteboard for offseason week 3. I would say I think the news will slow down, but I just, for some reason, don't think the news will slow down. There's several more question marks. Twisted Minds, third, is obviously a big one because right now they've got Nubo and TRK and no clue who is joining them. Obviously, the rest of North America outside of this top 4 has to settle. As I mentioned, Team BDS and BSK, whoever's left over from those trios, curious to see where they end up. So definitely still more to come. But as for now, thank you for watching. I will catch you guys in the next video. Shout out to the channel members that are currently scrolling across. Yes, I'm aware that I'm wearing sunglasses. It is partially because I want to look all cool for Space Station's new pickup, and also partially because I left my normal glasses in the car and I'm just way too lazy to go back down and get them. So thank you all for watching. Catch you guys next time. Cheers.